Okay, welcome everyone. Glad to see so many faces interested in mastering DevOps. So first thing I would like to say is that remember that feedback is a gift, and I personally love receiving gifts. So if you could leave a feedback in the app after this or other session, all the speaker, we would be very much obliged. And thank you for coming here, for being interested in making developers' life easier, but also on being interested in bringing value to stakeholders, to shareholders, in a more secure, more robust, and faster way. My name is Anna Wałak-Dudzic. I am engineering director and DevOps engineer. I didn't plan to become DevOps engineer. Basically, 12 years ago, when I started my career as a Salesforce developer, I was so frustrated with how the development looked like, with how the releases looked like. When I started, we were still using Ant migration tool. I had customer working with changes. I was so frustrated, I was trying to figure out what I can do about it. And that led me to the path of a DevOps engineer. That led me to a path of discovering all these awesome tools that Salesforce has today for better DevOps. And this is what I would like to present to you today. And if you are not sure if I actually have the experience, I'm currently employed at Akiva Labs, where we are doing two types of projects. We are doing projects for direct customers, both middle-sized, and as well as enterprise projects, but also we are expert PDO, which means we are doing apps for App Exchange. And if you know one thing about App Exchange, about development for App Exchange, is that you need to pass security review, and you need to pass it fast. So, yeah, I have the experience behind, but I will not be talking about my experience. I would like to talk about experience of a company you probably all know, which is called Universal Containers. Let's look at what Universal Containers is using. They are using Sales Cloud for managing their B2B sales, and they are also using Service Cloud to handle 3 levels of support, as well as some omni-channel and some additional products as a part of the Service Cloud. They have a small internal team. Currently, the team contains 2 developers, QA, admin, product owner, architect. So not a lot of people. They look at the backlog and they discover that they have quite a few items for the next few quarters, so they decided to hire a next person, a new developer, Cody. You all know Cody. Cody decided to join Universal Containers and help them for the next year or 2. He hates reading documentation. He hates onboarding processes. He wants to start coding as soon as possible, and that will be his objective for this presentation. On the other hand, we have Claudia, a Salesforce administrator who will be responsible for Cody onboarding. Claudia is in the Universal Containers for more than 3 years right now, and her personal motto is, if Mark Benioff didn't want us to make changes directly on production, why would he create Salesforce in a way that makes it possible? And they are all overseen by Ruth, Salesforce architect responsible for the whole project. So, Cody wants to start. And what does a developer need when they want to start? So first thing is, of course, project repository. Universal Containers do have a project repository, as every responsible project should. And that's because they want to have metadata backup. When something happens on the production, maybe some unexpected change or some bug from someone like Salesforce or someone else, you need to be able to restore the previous version. And keeping a project repository, a metadata backup, is the first step to be able to restore these issues. The second reason why project repository is a good idea is because if you have multiple developers, like Universal Containers has, you may experience conflicts and overriding of changes. You need to have a place where you investigate what one person produced, what the other person produced. Does it override one another? For example, because Universal Containers is using Service Cloud, changes to the case object will be very common. Even with source tracking, which is a way of, even with source format, which is a way of describing metadata that divides the case object into multiple files, you can still have a situation where the 2 or 3 developers are working on the same file. With the repository, you are able to detect quickly that there are conflicting changes. You can detect quickly what overrides what, and you can figure out the solution. You can merge the conflicting code and go to UAT, go to your next stages with unified and working code. This is what the repository gives you. And in Salesforce world, the second thing that every one of us needs to have is, of course, environment. We cannot deal with Salesforce, we cannot develop in Salesforce without a good development environment. And because Universal Containers is a responsible company, every engineer in Universal Containers has at least one development environment. Cody started wondering, what kind of environment will he get? Will this be a Scratch org? Will this be a sandbox? In his past job, he was actually working on Scratch orgs. They are very nice. You can generate them quickly. But is this a case in Universal Containers? So Claudia shared a story with him that a few months ago, they started investigating possible types of development environments, and they tried to figure out which one is best for this company. So they started with Scratch orgs. They started thinking about using Scratch orgs with something which is called org shape. It basically means you can base your Scratch org on a normal org, like your production or UAT. Excellent solution, right? You have most of the metadata. You don't have personal accounts enabled. You don't have communities. You have editions, and the correct edition and correct licenses, which is great. It's easy to create. But for example, it also does not have the packages installed. So it's maybe not the best solution for a company like Universal Containers, who have multiple packages installed on the org and very complicated enterprise cloud implementation. The second thing they considered was a Scratch org with snapshots. Snapshots means that you create your perfect Scratch org, call it a snapshot, and generate all future Scratch orgs from the snapshot. Excellent, it copies the metadata, the packages, the data, everything. But what if you have some exotic licenses, right, that you cannot replicate on the Scratch org? And what is the second problem is, of course, you created the snapshot. You created this beautiful snapshot. It took you 2 days to set it up perfectly, just for the snapshot to expire in 90 days. You say, oh, no problem, right? Because I can create a new snapshot from the old snapshot. No, you can't. You can't do that, unfortunately, not yet at least. So basically, you need to repeat all the steps one more time, which of course, with stuff like Salesforce CLI, is possible to automate. But then you need to spend the time automating all the steps, and maybe it was not worth it for Universal Containers. The third option they discovered were sandboxes. Sounds perfect on the first sight. It contains all the metadata, licenses, and packages that the production org contains. But it needs to be refreshed, and it needs to be seeded with data. So you see, nothing is a perfect solution, but you need to take a look at how does your production org look like, what is your priority, and based on that, Universal Containers made a quick decision. We are going with sandboxes. We will refresh them after every Salesforce major release. And we will also, what we will do is we will ask developers to deploy the recent changes to their sandboxes. So every time there is new release to the production, because we have this nice setup repository, they will deploy all the new changes to always have the sandboxes up to date. And the third thing that they did was that they figure out how to deal with data. And what they are using is SFDX Data Move Utility plugin. This is a plugin for Salesforce CLI, for Salesforce Command Line interface, and it allows you, with a quick configuration, with a very simple JSON file, flow your data from your production org to your sandbox and anonymize it on the fly. So perfect solution for company like universal containers. They have all the licenses, all the packages, all the data that they want. What's next? What else is there to know to start developing? Cloudy decided to share with Cody what is the Git branching strategy that Universal Containers is using. Again, there were multiple options to choose from, but they decided to stay with something that is called Git flow. And what they did is that they changed just this one thing, which means that every feature is actually not starting from the develop, from the project branch, it's starting from the main branch. What does it mean? If in the middle of the sprint, if in the middle of the release planning, customer, user changes their mind and decide to not include the release, to not include the feature in the release, that's possible, because we don't have all the features tangled together. So that's why they decided on such branching strategy. When Cloudy was explaining this all to Cody, he stopped for a moment. You know what? You can also find this strange-looking commits in our repository. And that's because I'm using something which is called DevOps Center. Previously, I was doing stuff either directly on production, or I was using change sets. But it caused a lot of problems. But we didn't really have time for me to learn how to use Git, all this pull request, and all the other stuff. So I'm using DevOps Center to be able to quickly retrieve changes from my sandbox and create pull requests to the repository, commit the changes to the repository, so the rest of the development team can review them and push them further. We were wondering if we could use DevOps Center, this free Salesforce tool that is available right now for everyone. We're wondering if we could use it also for stuff like building a pipeline, pushing our changes from environment to environment. But in Universal Containers, we already have a good working GitHub Actions integration. We already have good CI/CD process. So we decided that that would be a downgrade. And we will only stay with this feature that allows our admins to work efficiently. And you may wonder, why is it a bad thing to work on the production, right? Like, we have this option. Why cannot I use it? So basically, that's where Ruth, the architect, was introduced into the conversation, and happy to explain that to Cody. You see, doing stuff directly on production, doing changes directly on production, is dangerous to the users. If you introduce bug, you are blocking users from working. The lack of release notes and lack of training lowers the user adoption. Also, sometimes if just one person is listening to users and directly implementing it, it's not exactly what they need. It may be what they want, but it's not what they need, which is a problem, right? And it's also a problem for the team, for the process, because the changes do not go through secure process. The changes can be overwritten by the development team, by the deployments, by the releases. Also, no one knows what is happening on the production, right? Like, one person is clicking something and no one else knows what is happening. So it was not safe. We had to stop that. We didn't want to use change sets anymore, and we decided to go with DevOps Center. So, thanks to the changes that happen, Cloudy doesn't even feel like she needs to do changes on the production anymore. And that's because the new process is fast. Thanks to efficient CI/CD and automated tooling, the lead time, so from deciding what is the need to developing this on the production, it only takes 1 to 2 days. Also, she still has the high level of independency. She still works with users, and no one takes that from her. Also, thanks to the new process, she has the support from the team. They work together, they figure out together how to solve each of customers, each of end user problems. And of course, we are not tyrants, right? She can still do some stuff on production, because sometimes you want to deliver this value fast, like this small layout change, like this small data fix that would just take too much time for the user to do that. Maybe you want a new list view, or maybe you want a new report or dashboard. That's okay to do that on the production. Just make sure it's something that will not go into direct competition with your current development and with your current secure process. So Ruth started wondering if Cody is ready for his pull request, because he may be surprised by a few things that are happening in universal containers. First is that obviously, like every good company, universal containers is using Salesforce Code Analyzer, a plugin for Salesforce CLI that scans your code and detects the issue related to performance or quality. They made one small change, because normally the code analyzer just returns a text file with the results. So they are using a dedicated plugin that displays the result as comments in the code. So when you open the pull request with all the changes, all the comments appear almost immediately with all the information. But that is not enough for universal containers. They developed their own app called AI Checker, which is basically a small Heroku app which, when a pull request is created or updated, takes the information about the changed code, has very special, very well-engineered prompt that sends to OpenAI API, and in return receives another list of comments that can be published on the open pull request, so that the most obvious issues, most obvious problems can be resolved by computers, but by agents, right? And not by people who should focus on much more important stuff, like checking if business needs were properly translated to actual implementation. Of course, AI Checker maybe will be able to do that one day, but for now we still prefer human people to follow up on that. After explaining all of this, Ruth proposed to Cody that he may attend tomorrow's release. Cody did not want to attend tomorrow's release call. He knew that release calls take 4 to 6 hours, and he would much rather create another beautiful LWC component in that time. Oh, that's not the case in universal containers. You know, in universal containers, we try to keep all of this very quick and simple. And that's because we validate everything. We validate if the code that you submit is safe. We validate if it deploys. We run our test. Even though we have very large code base, we can do it fast because we are using something called SFDX Git Delta, another plugin from Salesforce CLI, which basically, based on the changes in the code taken from Git repository, generates you a deploy package with all the stuff that needs to be added, updated, but also deleted, because it generates a destructive changes file. So because we have that, our deploys are really small. And also, even though they are small, we prefer to do the deploy a day before release. We do a validation deploy. We do the validation deploy today. Tomorrow there is a code freeze on the production. And tomorrow, we will just, in the afternoon, click quick deploy. So in a few minutes, all changes will be committed to the production. And it will take much less time than an actual deploy done in a one run. Also, we know what we need to do because we have this very special template made on Confluence that we clone every time, where we store all the approvals, or all the test results, you know, all the things that we need to do pre and post deploy. We have this all set up in one place so that when we sit down for the release, we just go through the file, click through the stuff, all the scripts are prepared, so we can really minimize the potential of error. Because I long time ago discovered that half an hour of good communication can save you 8 hours of figuring out bugs on the production. You just need to communicate much beforehand, right? And while explaining that, Ruth mentioned one more thing. We all need to push in the same direction. We all need to focus on bringing universal containers to a better place. Not just faster development, faster value creation. If you want to know more, Cody, you can check out this code and basically follow the link for all the resources I mentioned, for all the links and all the plugins that I was describing to you. And you know what is left to do? Say thank you to the Universal Containers team for taking you for this beautiful adventure. I would like to thank you for being with me on this adventure. Remember to leave feedback, and I will be available over there if you want to ask any questions or maybe scan the QR code because, it was left too quickly. Thank you very much.